Today we're talking about the Matrix films. This is a series of films that began in 1999 and has been ongoing throughout the years, but there was a large lull where there was no Matrix movie for nearly 20 years. There's apparently a Matrix 5 in the works, which I find kind of odd, in the fact that 4 was more or less a financial disappointment. But if they do make another one, I am kind of excited to see what they do. So, without further ado, I decided to give you guys my ranking of the series from worst to best, starting with the Animatrix. I have nothing particularly against this film. I think it's actually a pretty fun little collection of shorts. It's 9 short stories that are all animated that take place within the Matrix world. They're all canon, apparently, and they were supervised by the Wachowskis. And ultimately, I do like the film, but I have a feeling that it kind of feels more like a TV show. It's kind of like 9 short episodes of something you'd see on TV. It kind of lacks that cinematic appeal, I feel. And while some of it is interesting visually, I don't think most of the stories really grasp me like the movies do. There's nothing really wrong with it. It just feels more like something that is a TV show as opposed to a feature-length film. And while I do recommend it, I think Matrix just works better in live action. Not bad, but kind of an acquired taste, I feel. Up next is 2003's The Matrix Revolutions. This was the conclusion to the original Matrix trilogy and came out the same year as The Matrix Reloaded. The story this time around shows Neo having to re-enter to the Matrix and make a deal with the machines to take out Agent Smith once and for all. Along the way, Trinity as well as Morpheus are trying to find Smith, and the humans are using giant mech suits to fight these squid machines. All in all, it's pretty climactic and big and exciting, but it's also overly animated. The kung fu fights are probably the lamest this time around. There's a pretty decent one with Morpheus and Trinity where they fight on the ceiling in this one sequence, but the rest is kind of forgettable. There's a big fight between Neo and the Smith in the rain, and they're fighting like DBZ characters flying around the city and punching each other in their CGI faces. It's a bit much. The film also tries to get philosophical, much like the second film, but the philosophy is just kind of boring here, and it's not told in a particularly interesting manner. It's an okay little conclusion, but a bit lacking. It just doesn't have that excitement that the first two films brought in this trilogy. Not terrible, but kind of a lackluster ending, I feel, to the original trilogy. Coming in third place is 2003's Matrix Reloaded. This was a continuation of the first film, The Matrix, and came out 4 years later. This film, I think, is actually a pretty damn good sequel. It shows Neo and Trinity and Morpheus once again trying to rid the Matrix of Agent Smith and take on the machines as they attack Zion. This one's kind of interesting because there are some new things, such as seeing Zion for the first time. You get to see Neo's powers and full ability here. He can fly around like Superman this time around. He can fight hundreds of Smiths at once. He's basically a full-blown superhero. And that makes for kind of an interesting movie. The downside, though, is that it feels a lot less grounded than the first. I get that that Neo has more or less tapped into the Matrix and become more powerful than ever. But having said that, it just feels more like kind of video gamey, superhero-y, as opposed to the kung fu / John Woo style action of the first film. It feels more like something out of DBZ mixed with, I don't know, Superman. It is fun, and there's a great chase sequence on this highway where Trinity is on this motorcycle, and the stunt woman does an amazing job in this scene and drives against oncoming traffic for like an entire half mile, and it's just great. Best part of the movie, and probably one of the most exciting sequences in the whole series. A very fun sequel, but lacks a lot of that grounded nature of the first film, and the philosophical elements of this film are a bit heavy-handed. I don't find them nearly as interesting as the philosophical elements of the first Matrix movie. A good film, but not one that I think was necessary, and I think there probably could have just been one Matrix movie, but still fun and one that I do recommend. Up next, and possibly controversially, the very divisive The Matrix Resurrections. The most recent film into the Matrix franchise, this one was only directed by Lana Wachowski. The other Wachowski did not return this time around, and you can kind of see that in some elements. The story is basically about Neo, who's been replugged into the Matrix by the machines, getting discovered by a new group of resistance fighters, and they attempt to get him out. He eventually does come out of the Matrix and wants to go back in to try to save Trinity, and that's the basic story. I really love the first third of this movie, a lot. I really like how you're not sure if he's just crazy, if the first 3 movies happened. He's basically shown to be a video game developer who made a trilogy of games called The Matrix. He eventually finds out, though, that they weren't games, that they really happened, and they were more the first 3 movies. But his mind has been twisted and warped by the machines to think that it was all fiction. So he has to free his mind and let go and be brought back into the real world, which is kind of fun. It's basically more a retelling of the first Matrix movie, but in a more modern setting. And I really like that. Carrie-Anne Moss this time in The Matrix is a character named Tiffany, and she doesn't remember her past life either. And it's a pretty damn cool story. And I think the first third of the movie is the best part of the movie. The only thing I don't like about it is the real world stuff. This time, most of the real world is this place called Io instead of Zion. It more or less is Zion, but just kind of more advanced. Also, what's cool this time around is characters within the Matrix, like NPCs, can come into the real world through machines. So there's machines in the movie that are more characters from the Matrix, but in our world, kind of like a reverse. How humans go into the Matrix, now machines can go into the real world. And I think it's actually pretty interesting. There's also a new character, which is a new Morpheus this time around, played by Yahya Abdul Mateen II. Forgive me if I'm butchering that name. And he's more a digital version of Morpheus created by Neo. I do think it's kind of interesting, but I really would have preferred Lawrence Fishburne just to be in the movie. Agent Smith has also been replaced this time by Jonathan Groff, and I don't really care for that. I think Hugo Weaving is amazing as the character, and Jonathan Groff does bring something unique to the role, and I kind of like his take on Agent Smith. But I really wish they just got Hugo Weaving back. Even digitally de-age him if he wanted to be young. But he's a virus, he can look however the hell he wants, just say, hey, I wanted to look older. But apart from those few gripes, and me not really liking the second act, which is mostly real world stuff, I do enjoy the first act a lot, and I think the third act of them rescuing Trinity is also pretty fun. As an action movie, it is lacking, and there are some weird cameos, such as the French guy coming back. I don't know why the hell he was even in this movie. But ultimately, I think it's a fun movie that has actually entertaining philosophy, unlike The Matrix Revolutions, but is a little lackluster in the action department. It does have some good action scenes towards the end, but just expect more of a philosophical drama, sci-fi movie, as opposed to an action movie, and I think you'll have a good time. The Matrix Resurrections, I feel it's a little bit misunderstood, and pretty entertaining. But you just can't beat the original, The Matrix. About a computer whiz named Tom Anderson who finds out that his world is a lie and he's living in a computer world known as The Matrix. He gets rescued by these freedom fighters who live in the real world and awakens to the real world and finds out that it is a post-apocalyptic hellscape where machines are trying to kill us. The best way I can describe this movie is like a mix between Tron and The Terminator, and it is pretty damn awesome. I don't like it as much as The Terminator, but I do think it's probably more interesting than Tron. I think the action in this movie is fantastic. I think the special effects are really good. Most of them are really practical. There is some CGI that's a little dated, but apart from that, everything looks great in the movie. All the characters are pretty interesting for the most part, although I think that they got a little bit more development in the Resurrections than they do here. Some of the acting can be a bit stiff. Keanu Reeves is kind of one note, but that's kind of the actor he is. Much like Sylvester Stallone, he's great in certain roles. There's just not a lot of range, but he is great as Neo. Carrie Moss is trying as Trinity, but I kind of wish they had given her more to do as far as like character development. But Lawrence Fishburne just kills it as Morpheus and is the best character in the movie. I even wish they'd make a prequel movie with Morpheus. Just use the guy that plays the digital version of him in the new movie, and you're all set. Great action movie, and Hugo Weaving is amazing in this film as well as this corrupt program known as Agent Smith. And ultimately, if you like good sci-fi or good action, you really have to watch The Matrix. It was probably the best movie of 1999, if not one of them, and one that I very much enjoy. Go out, watch this film if you haven't seen it, and wow, it's just great. Well, that's my list. I very much do enjoy these films, and I think that they're overall pretty good. I think Revolutions is a little weak, and The Animatrix kind of leaves something to be desired. But all in all, I do think it's a fun franchise. There's also a really cool video game called The Matrix: The Path of Neo that takes place across the first three films, and I do very much recommend this game. It's wacky and crazy and over the top, and it's just a fun Max Payne clone with some kung fu thrown in. There's also a game called Into the Matrix, but it's not quite as good as this one. But if you can get your hands on this one, it's pretty good. It's on the PS2 and original Xbox. This has been an interesting list to make. Leave your list down below if you'd like, and let me know if you want to see a Matrix 5. Thank you for watching, and peace out.